Welcome. So you've brought us this really interesting collection today. It's a breakdown of a recent Joe Rogan experience with Tim Dillon.
Yeah, nearly 3 hours long, I think. Quite a conversation.
Exactly. So our mission really is to kind of sift through all of that and pull out the most, let's say, insightful bits, the surprising stuff.
Save everyone some time, but still get the core ideas across.
Right, because they cover a lot. We're talking, the edge of space, unsolved mysteries, political claims, even UFOs.
All filtered through Rogan's curiosity and Dillon's particular brand of satire, I suppose.
Definitely his sharp wit. Okay, so let's dive in. Where did they even start?
It sounds like they began by looking, well, up toward space.
Ah, okay. Yeah, the recap mentioned they got into the definition of where space actually begins. Something about 62 miles.
That's right. 62 miles up is sort of the official line, the threshold.
But then it also mentioned that some missions, not Apollo, but others, have gone way higher, like 350 miles.
Yeah, significantly higher.
So why is that 62-mile mark the important one then, if we've gone further?
Well, that 62 miles, it's roughly the Kármán line. It's basically where the atmosphere gets too thin for, like, normal aircraft wings to work. You need rockets.
Ah, okay. So it's an aeronautics thing.
Exactly. It's a practical boundary in a way. But going higher, like that 350 miles, just shows, the constant push. We keep going further out.
Right. And it wasn't just technical stuff, was it? They talked about female astronauts.
Yeah.
And celebrity interest, too, like Katy Perry.
Yeah, that human element came in, the increasing diversity in who goes to space and this wider cultural fascination.
What does that signal, do you think? That celebrities are now, like, interested in space trips?
I think it shows space travel is becoming maybe less purely scientific, more mainstream, part of the culture. When you have diverse people involved, not just, test pilots or scientists, it makes it feel maybe a bit more accessible, or at least aspirational in a different way.
Yeah, makes sense. And inevitably, private space travel came up. Elon Musk.
You can't really talk about space now without mentioning him, can you? Or the private companies in general.
True. It feels like a massive shift is happening.
Absolutely. It's reshaping everything, competition, the tech, the goals. It really makes you wonder, like, what's the driving force going to be? Pure business, science.
There's some mix.
Probably some mix, yeah. Lots to consider there.
Okay, so from, like, the literal final frontier, they apparently took a sharp turn. Right back down to Earth.
A very sharp turn to something pretty dark, actually.
Yeah, the 1991 yogurt shop murders in Austin. I remember hearing about this. Just horrific.
Truly awful. 4 young girls killed in the shop.
And it's still unsolved, right, after all this time.
That's the chilling part. Still unsolved. The recap mentioned it was covered in an HBO documentary, too.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Oh.
It must just hang over a city.
Oh, definitely. An unsolved crime like that, especially involving kids, it leaves a deep scar. Affects the whole community's sense of safety for, well, forever, really.
And the fact it's still being discussed, getting documentaries made.
It just shows that need for answers, for closure. It's a really heavy reminder of, that pain.
Okay, shifting gears again, because it sounds like they covered a lot of ground. Politics came up. Specifically immigration.
Yes, there was a specific claim mentioned, something about 10 million people entering the U.S. under the Biden administration, over 4 years.
Right, that number. You hear it cited a lot in certain political circles, often based on border data estimates, I think.
It's a huge figure, and figures like that, they tend to generate a lot of heat, a lot of debate.
Yeah. So when you hear a number like 10 million, how should we, approach that as listeners trying to understand?
Well, the first step is always to ask, where does the number come from? What's the source? What's a methodology?
Yeah.
Because political rhetoric often uses numbers very selectively, to make a specific point. It's crucial to look past the headline figure.
Try and find the underlying data from different sources if possible.
Exactly. Get a fuller picture rather than just the soundbite number.
Okay. And sticking with commentary, but maybe moving towards satire, this one jumped out. A $1.5 million stabbing wagon grant.
Laughs slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does sound like classic Tim Dillon territory, doesn't it?
It sounds completely absurd. I mean, what's the likely target there? Government spending.
Probably. Or maybe some kind of urban safety program that he sees as ridiculous or ineffective.
Right.
Satire often works by taking something real, maybe a concern about spending or specific policy, and just blowing it up into something totally illogical.
To make you laugh, but also maybe think about the original point.
Precisely. That exaggeration is key.
Okay, then another pivot. high-end real estate. Seems random.
Well, maybe not entirely. It relates to wealth, pressure, maybe modern work culture.
How so? They mentioned an agent, Dolly Lenz, getting 700 emails a day.
Yeah, 700 daily at her peak.
That's insane.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? The sheer intensity and, frankly, the pressure cooker environment of that luxury market.
Constant demand. Instant responses needed.
Exactly. It's a glimpse into a very specific high-stakes world.
Yeah.
And maybe says something about, wealth concentration or just the pace we live at now.
True. Okay, and finally the topic that always seems to come up on shows like Rogan's. UFOs.
Ah, yes. The unexplained. What was the angle this time?
They talked about a documentary, Age of Disclosure, apparently featuring 34, senior officials or members.
Okay. Claiming what?
Claiming there's been an 80-year cover-up of extraterrestrial encounters.
Wow, okay. That's quite the claim. 80 years.
Yeah, definitely fuel for conspiracy theories.
Right, absolutely. Narratives like that, they tap into something deep, don't they? The desire to know what's out there, maybe a bit of distrust in official stories.
And having senior members involved, that adds a layer of...
Perceived credibility, yeah. Makes it harder to just dismiss outright for some people, even if the proof isn't concrete.
Yeah, it raises that question, doesn't it? How do you weigh that kind of testimony against, the lack of hard evidence or official denials?
It's a tricky one. A classic extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence situation, maybe.
And this wasn't in isolation. Right. The recap touched on broader UFO talk, Roswell, those declassified Pentagon reports.
Right, the 144 unexplained sightings, I think.
Correct.
That whole discussion has definitely become more mainstream recently.
It really has. So it sounds like they covered even more than these main points, too.
Yeah, the recap hinted at a few other threads, things like traditional media versus podcasts, CNN versus Rogan's Spotify numbers, that kind of thing.
Right, the changing media landscape.
And mentioning Trump and Biden again, probably linking back to the immigration stuff.
Okay.
Also, quick mentions of global events like Ukraine, asset freezes, and tech advancements. NVIDIA, quantum computing.
Wow. And more true crime beyond the yogurt shop.
Apparently, yeah. National park disappearances, other Austin serial killer cases. It really sounds like they bounce around quite a bit.
It does. A real conversational journey covering just about everything.
That list really shows the eclectic mix, doesn't it? How these long-form conversations can just weave through so many different topics.
Totally. So, okay, we've kind of walked through the highlights now, distilled from that long discussion.
From space definitions to Austin tragedies, political numbers, satire, real estate pressure, UFO cover-ups.
Yeah, the whole range. Hopefully this gives everyone a good sense of what was covered, maybe spark some thoughts without needing the full 3-hour commitment.
And it highlights the sheer variety in that original conversation.
Definitely. We hope people listening might think about what stood out most to them, maybe dig deeper into one of these areas.
Yeah, because each point kind of opens up bigger questions, doesn't it?
Like what?
Well, with private spaceflight, what are the ethics involved now? Or how does an unsolved case truly affect a city long term?
Right. Or with those big political numbers, what questions should we always be asking?
Exactly. And with UFOs, how do we as individuals evaluate these really extraordinary claims, especially when they involve alleged insiders?
Lots to chew on.
Definitely. These are the kinds of questions that sort of ripple out from their conversation.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has been a useful shortcut, giving you the essence of that Rogan Dillon chat, leaving you informed and maybe a bit more curious.